Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Miguel Garibay, and on behalf of the Tortora Brera Institute, I would like to welcome you to a roundtable discussion, the role of AI in democracy. Before we begin, I would like to share a little bit about the Tortora Brera Institute and our sponsor. The Tortora Brera Institute was created to promote collaboration across public and private sectors with a focus on business, culture, and diversity. We're looking to reshape and develop collaboration and partnering practices with a view to improving and securing business and economies. A core concept of the Institute is our think tank for partnership excellence. The think tank has allowed us to bring together experts and leaders from the public and private sectors and academia from around the world to reshape and develop collaboration and partnering practices while embracing the most critical technology growth. If you are not currently a member of the Institute, we invite you to visit our website to learn more and see how you can participate. We want to give a special thank you to our sponsor for this event, Gorilla Corporation. Gorilla Corporation is a leader global sales, marketing, and technology channel development company with a focus on serving the technology industry. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Sidney Guerrero. Mr. Guerrero is an investor, an entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience in executive leadership, technology, mergers, and acquisitions. He has helped launch new market solution verticals across his career in blockchain, cybersecurity, AI, ML, and professional services domestically and globally for industry leaders. He is the CEO of TGG Experts and a founding member of the AI for Government Task Force at the Tortora Brera Institute. Sydney, take it away.
Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm honored to moderate this distinguished panel of individuals: Donaldo, Aaron, Courtney, nice to meet you, Suzanne, Tim, Jill, and Miguel. Thank you so much. It is an incredible event as we discuss the impact of artificial intelligence as part of the central reality that we face today. It's in the broad use in all our lives. It's helped transforming our societies. For the most part, it's beneficial. Some may argue that it's harmful. What we want to do and accomplish with the panel today is hear from their perspective, from all sorts of different realities, what the impact of AI, artificial intelligence on democracy today, both today and in the future, right? They all come from various different backgrounds, and how AI-based technology, whether it does today, tomorrow, and functioning in democratic institutions, processes, social and political behaviors. So we'll start off with a small softball questions for the group, and I'm going to put Courtney on the spot right off as our councilwoman. What does it mean to you when we talk about democracy and AI? Courtney?
Sydney, could you repeat the last part of the question? You got cut off.
So what does it mean to you when we talk about democracy and AI, artificial intelligence democracy? What does that mean to you as a city councilwoman for Emeraldville, California?
So for me, in local government, I think about how AI has shown itself to be potentially access for us to have more effective government and have more effective government services. Cities all across California and counties have used AI, predictive analytics to improve, I would say, not just their services, but also as we think about, I'm sorry, could you hold on for just one moment? There's an emergency back here.
No worries, no worries. So Tim, why don't you take us from there as well? What does digital democracy and AI mean to you?
So to me, AI is a supporting technology to accomplish things that we're already trying to accomplish. So to me, democracy is freedom for human rights, freedom of association, education, freedom of expression, transparency and accountability, all of those things. And so I always think of what are we trying to accomplish first without AI, and then ask the question, what can we do with AI to support those same goals that we've been fighting for hundreds of years? And there's a number of things that we could do that I'm sure we're going to cover a little later, but that's what it means to me.
No worries. Suzanne, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Tim just answered for me, right? Democracy means we have rights. What are those rights? Rights to access, rights to information, rights to truth, to fairness, right? Now, very specifically to my situation, we're trying to apply AI to capital markets. And there's this notion of perfect information. When we watch the stock market, we know that's incorrect. That's absolutely unobtainable. So can we do better? As Tim said, can we do better? Is this a tool that can help us do better? Well, we certainly hope so. That's the point, of course, but many different views. I turn to the panel, look forward to everyone's comments. Glad to be here. Thanks.
Fascinating. All right. So, Courtney, was there anything else you wanted to add? I know you were talking with regards to how it impacts you. So,
Yeah, sorry about that. My little one is homesick. He was exposed to COVID. We're still managing through that. But no, yes, stating earlier, as a local elected official, we see AI as an opportunity to be more effective with our government services. Folks, residents all across either the city or the county can contact us through all types of different AI platforms to let us know about things such as infrastructure issues, traffic issues, safety concerns. I personally use See, Click, Fix to report issues to public works. And the turnaround time has been nothing short of amazing. Typically within hours, the longest I've ever seen was a 24-hour turnaround for a larger public works issue that just required more tools. It was a very large tree had fallen after a storm. So we see it as an opportunity to be just more effective in the way our cities and counties function and allow us to create a safer space for all of our residents.
Aaron, I know you're itching to comment on this as our AI engineer and data scientist. What are your thoughts?
I really appreciate the words of Courtney there, and it's wonderful to have a local councilwoman like that be thinking about the tactical applications of artificial intelligence. I was just going to say, with regard to your question, using AI in government isn't always about surveillance or taxes or policing. Like Councilwoman has said, it's about how we do sanitation, refuse, energy, health, and infrastructure better. And really, I don't know if we're always talking about artificial intelligence. I think we're talking about really enabling, like she said, with See, Click, Fix, every citizen to become a sensor. And as every citizen is a sensor, how they provide data, how that data provides better decisioning or actions. Sometimes AI, but sometimes just better information management.
Okay. Well, I thank you all for that. So let's switch gears a little bit, and I'll bounce back because I kind of like where this was going. So we talk about obviously putting AI, and we talk about how it's going to impact the community. Is there a concern for like ethical frameworks now as it supports democracy and supports the AI that's developed in full respect to our lives and our use, our fundamental rights, rule of law, and democracy? Anya, what are your thoughts on that? You're on mute.
I'll be very frank. Thank you so much for inviting me. Apologies about the small technical hiccup. But I'm thrilled to be here because democracy to me is actually, as an immigrant standpoint, very kind of head scratching. We all aren't actually on the same definition of what democracy is. So, part of the reason why I would love to join all of you smart people in talking about this issue is so that we can agree on what it is and be more inclusive of us as the United States. So that's what I think we should start off as, is what is democracy and how can we further tell everyone else about what it is and getting on.
Sure, not a problem. And so, again, when we talk about democracy or AI in specifics for this webinar today, it's all about utilizing the technology that's pervasive today. We have the panel of distinguished guests across the whole cross-section. Courtney outlined a number of key, exciting, and specific examples of how we can utilize that technology to automate, accentuate, accelerate the delivery of services, not only from the delivery of services, but also the information. So as we turn into the discussion framework, let's talk a little bit about from a past perspective. Are there current examples today where AI and democracy is being utilized today? Sonia, I'll let you kind of kick that off, and Tim, I'd like you to kind of do a follow-up to that.
Great.
Thank you, Sydney. I think the two largest examples of where AI is really helping in democracy, in the people's voice, is first and foremost Estonia, and then Taiwan, which is where I was born, so hence the interest. And, I think what's special about Estonia and Taiwan, we have to remember, is that they started their digital movement of getting all their citizens digital with digital entity a long time ago. This was maybe 20 years ago they started, right? And so they have different paths of what they have done. Estonia, literally, I think I've heard 95% of their government services, registration for babies, healthcare, medical care, everything is all digitalized. So when COVID hit, work from home was a breeze. It was no sweat to them whatsoever. So Estonia is kind of really entrenched in that digital identity, digital citizenship. Now, Taiwan also has this movement, and I think they're a little bit further behind than Estonia, but they're very much quickly involving, I suppose, the younger, like the 30s, the 40s crowd, and 20s and so forth, population, to include themselves and their voices into the government. One last thing that I wanted to mention about these two really star examples is also that their geopolitics gave them the push to reinvent themselves, become smarter, become a smarter world power.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And thank you for that. And due from some technical difficulties, what I'll do is Tim, as you follow up, just give us a quick, 2-minute intro onto yourselves as you answer, and then I'll go through the group. So Tim, as you respond to the questions, a little bit of bragging on yourself. How about that?
Very quickly, my background's in quantitative analysis. I worked in various data roles for most of my career. I currently am CEO of Cinco AI and teach AI and automation at the University of Utah. So you asked the question, a couple areas where we're using it today. And so I heard a great quote the other day: AI is called AI until it's in your everyday use. Maybe someone on this panel said that. And then we stopped calling it AI. It's just part of what we do. So there's two areas that really interest me. One is in democracy, we have this idea of association and freedom of press. And so let's take social media as an example. It absolutely opened that up for us, increased our ability to associate with like-minded people and communicate our opinions. The flip side of that is it also enabled misinformation and information that was recommended to us based on prior things that we looked at. It created kind of this echo chamber for information. Another one is the rule of law. Rule of law is absolutely a core requirement of democracy. This is one I worry about. On the one hand, we're seeing things like there's been articles about North Point's prisoner assessment or racial bias in determining who should be sent to prison. You know, what is your score based on the crime you committed? And it wasn't recognized early that these systems are so smart that even if you don't put race or any other protected class, they can still figure out from address or other things, and they became racially biased or biased in other ways. And so those are the things that scare me, that worry me on the one side, and I also think we have some interesting uses for them on the other. For racial bias, we also have anomaly detection that we can use now to fight that. And so AI is can be neutral. It can go both ways. We need to be very careful.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And Donaldo, I'll have you kind of talk, especially from a perspective, and since we didn't get a chance to do introduction, Donaldo brings over 18 years of experience. He's the supervisory special agent in charge for the FBI San Francisco Division, National Security and Cyber Criminal Squad. Had worked at the FBI Sacramento headquarters, including the U.S. Embassy of Belgrade. So, Donaldo, thank you for joining us today, and tell us from your perspective, especially with regards to the efficacy and concern, and what's happened in the past. If you can share some comments with us today.
Well, thank you for having me speak on this topic. It's an honor. I mean, artificial intelligence. I mean, I've heard us talk about why we're doing it, and we need an ethical framework. For me, it's fairly simple, because part of our mission is to enforce laws and with adherence to the Constitution. So that's our framework. And with the Constitution, you have protections of privacy, protection from self-incrimination. So then these are the things that kind of need to govern how we implement AI. I mean, it's just a technology. It can be used for good or evil. And what we're seeing, since I'm typically going against our adversaries or criminals and nation states, they are already using artificial intelligence. There's lots of information that they've taken legitimately. There's public source information. All of this can be combined, and it can be used for various nefarious purposes. So just in short, what we need to do on the law enforcement side is take advantage of AI, see how we can use it to fight our adversaries. And we just have to stay ahead of it, because this artificial intelligence, we can't treat it as a black box. I mean, it's a computer technology. Certain things are going to come out of it, but we have to look at the outputs and just make our artificial intelligence better, so it does what we want it to do.
Okay, Aaron, what is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm really glad that we kind of landed on this. I appreciate what Donaldo said, and especially what Tim said. I think sometimes we get hyped up on wanting to define what artificial intelligence is and what artificial intelligence and democracy is, and we haven't stepped back and really approached this from a first principles approach, really defining the business opportunity or the analytics challenge. And so, just as Anja led off with, how do we define democracy? Well, actually, in the US, it's a republic, right? And so what are the elements of democracy we want to measure? And how do we want to create a sort of AI maturity index along those? Just a quick look, you'll find that there's a framework for democracy that includes equality, natural law, representative government, separation of powers, popular sovereignty, limited government, rule of law, and individual liberty. Another framework has 5: participation, accountability, conflict resolution, concern for equality and justice. And then we're all familiar with the classic 3: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. My itch and my challenge is, how do you couch and characterize what artificial intelligence is to life? What artificial intelligence is, maturity-wise, to liberty? What artificial intelligence is, and the opportunities exist for pursuit of happiness in that 8, 5, or 3 degree framework?
Okay, Suzanne, any comments to that?
Well, Aaron flipped me in a whole different direction, so I have to thank you right off the bat. But Donaldo, what I was about to say before Aaron was back to Donaldo, because what is the word when people say black box? The hair flies up. Black box, no. And the word that we're right on the edge of in both Aaron and Donaldo, Tim as well, is trust, right? Can AI be trusted? Thank you, Courtney. Yes. Can we trust this? And in my work, often people start from fear. We're afraid of AI. It's going to take our jobs, or it's a meteor coming to smash us from outer space. What is? It's not Martians, but it doesn't feel right. Something feels wrong. People are people are nervous, they're laughing, saying, but actually, maybe not that funny, right? If it all works well, we can laugh, but what if we can't? And I think that key word is trust. How do we create systems that are transparent so they can be trusted, so it's not a black box? And how can the technology bring a benefit? And it can be to elevate people and be assistive, if you will. Microsoft, we work very closely with Microsoft. They're on a huge thing, assistive technology. The point being it's supposed to help, right? So how do we do that? And how do we assure the trust? And of course, I'm throwing a lot of questions here, no answers, but I think it's a key part. And thank you for bringing us around to that.
Well, Donaldo, I think there's a couple of questions kind of back at you. So let's bring in, we talked about the past, so we're about present, right? So today, whether it be things that happened in previous elections or today, as we move forward, what are your thoughts in regards to that, law enforcement and everything that they've discussed with both Aaron, Tim, Suzanne, even Courtney and Anjo?
Yeah, I think trust is very important. I mean, do you trust your government? And can you verify what they're doing? I mean, that's probably the difference between a country like Estonia and the United States. I mean, I think because of the geopolitical situation in Estonia, they decided they needed to have a government that was very virtual because there's like a physical threat of another country invading them, right? So they want to be virtual. But trust is very important. And in the past, we have seen, I mean, it's public source that there have been foreign malign actors who influenced our election. They were able to do that using artificial intelligence and various means. And the way we can stay ahead of that is understand why you're seeing, like, let's say you get certain types of content on your, from various social media. Understand how they got there and just be aware that it's possible that you're being manipulated, or it's possible that there's the advertising is directed at you. So understand what's happening, and that's going to help you. That's going to help like individuals not be manipulated. And so if you can understand what's going on, we can use technology and use it for what we're supposed to use it for.
Hey, Sidney, let me build on. Can I build on what Donaldo and Susan said real quick? Because I think it's coming to a great culmination. I just want to really pin it for the audience. And I think that, trusting government, none of us are going to trust our government or trust AI in government if we can't first see that AI at work, like those things that Courtney highlighted for us. You'll trust AI in government when it helps your garbage get picked up on time, when it helps the potholes get fixed. And so I think if we're going to roll this out across government, we ought to not look at security. We ought to not look at taxes. We ought to look at the efficiencies and operations of government and how sensors and information, and it becomes more ubiquitous in the day-to-day affairs of what government truly provides. There isn't happiness by more police. There's more happiness by quality of life.
And if I could just add to Aaron's point, being the government, AI at the end of the day, it's a tool, and the tool is going to be utilized to reach the goal of the person or the institution utilizing it. If your goal is to be racially biased, you're going to use it for such. That doesn't necessarily mean at the end of the day, AI itself is racially biased, but yes, people can use it to manipulate it to perform and reach that type of goal. But then it's the same on the other end. If you want to use AI for a more equitable experience, then that's also can be obtained and it can be used for good. But and to use an old term, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. We have to learn and grow and understand, yes, there are people that are using these tools to be bad actors, to spread misinformation, to interfere with elections. And since we know that's coming, we can then work and design to make sure that becomes more difficult as time goes on. But unfortunately, there are going to be bumps in the road, but as we're learning and growing, we can shift the potential of that happening. We can shift that much lower because we know and we can see it. Okay, we've got an election coming up. We're in election year right now. And so we know we've been seeing since 2016, election interference is something that folks have been using AI for. So we know that we can study it and we can learn from it and shift away from the possibilities of that issue continuing to grow on such a global scale.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. So, Anya, I know that with your background and experience, especially building data technology, software for gaming, finance, ad tech, including neuroscience, wanted to get your perspective from that on creating, building the tool, and as we talked all about with regard to the safeguards. Give us your perspective on that.
Well, I think the answer will evolve, and we just have to test and keep testing. I think what Courtney said and what Aaron said is really important. I think they also pointed out, there is an internal use of this tool, and then there's an external use, and they're both protecting the people. So I guess to answer, can you say the question again?
Okay, so it's all about you're creating. They talked about with regards to the trust, right, and the trust in the tools and in decisions, right. So what I wanted to, I think what we're looking for is from a perspective of whether it be the data, how do you create it, how to get secured. What does that look like, right? And we talked about from a past with Estonia, Taiwan, and Switzerland. So it's in today's society, right? So, and I think you touched upon it a little bit, which is the evolution from a slow perspective with the current technology, but this is going to be an evolution, right? We're already talking about the meta and all these different, virtual realities, and we've gotten a little bits and tastes of that. But imagine taking that technology, and now the natural evolution, at least from my perspective, is to automate, to accelerate, right? I love the direction that Courtney was going, which is how do I create, especially the redundant types of requests, whether it be for garbage pickups or services to be delivered. So that's that perspective, right? And how you create something that would take several hours to days can be done instantaneously, right? Maybe with handheld devices, which almost every single person on the planet has that. So now take that to the perspective of, okay, giving them the opportunity to provide direct feedback and provide instantaneous feedback. But and then that also leads into the security, right? Donaldo talked about not only monitoring our internal but also external and foreign, influence in that data, right? So it is all a culmination of these factors to do that. So I wanted to talk a little bit, and I think Aaron touched, and again, from a point of introduction for Aaron, Aaron is a member of the Department of Commerce, of National Technology Information Services, NTIS, and the advisory board. He's also an AI engineer and a data scientist. So tell me, Aaron, from your perspective, how this all, and we're touching upon, kind of the security and the trust, how do you fuse the curriculum and the backgrounds from an education perspective and how that represents democracy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's a key opportunity that we have. And fortunately, I see a lot of community colleges. I'll call out specifically Miami-Dade College that is developing an AI curriculum for associates and baccalaureate degrees. And that's exciting for me. It's not to say that these people are going to go out and create convolutional neural networks, but they're going to get started in what I call the blue collar AI disciplines. They're going to graduate folks that do automation, that do data engineering, that do data visualization for the purposes and expressed intents of helping some of those tactical things that are going to need more of this. The small and medium businesses, the churches, the social organizations that run across our communities and are in fact our glue. I don't know the exact percent, but I do know that the largest employer in the United States is not the large corporations, but are the small and medium businesses. And they're the folks that haven't yet had the time, the economy to afford artificial intelligence engineers. And I don't think that they're, like I said, are going to go with convolutional neural networks on day two. But I do think that they're going to start with a lot more automation, a lot more data engineering, and a lot more data visualization. And that's what I'm excited we start teaching in education. And I'll express this. There's a wonderful teacher at Miami-Dade right now that is helping her students work to understand and text mine the Harry Potter books to understand how J.K. Rowling wrote, what words she used, and how she elicited a response. And what a great way to inject and introduce textual analytics, data analysis, and sorts in a non-traditionally STEM degree. But I think that's the future of work and the future of advice.
So it's interesting. Some of the viewers have questions and they keep coming. I think we definitely hit the sweet spot with this questions because we keep coming back. I think you hit a nerve. Recall who mentioned it and talked about the saturation of misinformation, right? And how can we design AI in the future to prevent the absorption and acting on that misinformation? So anyone want to take that? How about Suzanne? We haven't talked to you. So Suzanne brings a wealth of Wall Street expertise and experience, and her sweet spot is risk mitigation and data. So Suzanne, and a Wharton graduate as well, seven-time institutional investor, all-star analyst. So Mrs. Cook is definitely a person. So Suzanne, please.
Well, thank you, Sydney. It's embarrassing hearing all that, but I'll try to take a stab at it. What do you say? So how can technology help, right? And what does this word AI even mean? It's really just technology intensity. It's just technology taking on more and more of the burden that is either challenging because it's difficult or massive, or we have haystacks for looking for needles, all of the above, right? But I think that we have to stay humble and recognize that, as Anya said, we're on a journey. It's still early. And what's fascinating about how early we are is people are still arguing, what is AI doing? What could it do? What should it do? What it should not do? That's a sign of a frontier of technology when you're still having those kind of challenges and essential questions. But clearly, a lot of people interested in this topic, a lot of momentum. I love what Aaron's saying. Even kids are getting in. Great. The more kids, the better, right? And it's just something that has a lot of power for good, but we have to be very guarded about how we go off the rails. So put some guardrails on there. And I just thank everyone for getting in it here today. And of course, welcome the questions from the audience. It's funny, as you say, Sydney, there's already a pattern trending toward that one question. So when you know.
No worries. And so the question came along with regards to the saturation of misinformation, right? And so if you think about AI and the technology, right? It is and Courtney touched upon it as well, right? It is a tool, right? It is a tool that's provided to disseminate the information. And then, as a founding member for the AI and Democracy think tank, right? The concept is to allow all perspectives, whether it be pro or con, against a specific data point, to share their perspective, right? From a politician, their ability to communicate to their constituents on the merits and the positive of a certain point, but also you want to give the counter argument as well, right? And so to let the people receive the information. Is it going to be a constant kind of fact check? Yes, those are all part of the design. We all talked about we talked about kind of preserving the data, but then there's also how do you protect or filter out the information going in. So that is all part of this. Is not a system or a replication of the system as it is today, but it will take into account feedback and probably councils and different structures from those outside. One of the follow-up questions from the audience as well is that with AI becoming ubiquitous, right? It ideally needs to be hidden in the background. So how can the average lay person know that they can trust what is there and trust what is being done? It's a little bit of a hot topic. So Tim, as Chief Data Officer of Advenery and also a professor highly skilled in AI and automation. So tell us a little bit, from your perspective, what are your thoughts? And then we'll go from there.
Let me build on what Aaron was saying, because I love what he was saying. The first step in trust is familiarity. And so I completely agree with what he said. AI is being democratized quickly. If you want to go play around with a neural net, I taught my 6-year-old granddaughter neural nets with Google's Teachable Machine. I taught her, she taught it how to read sign language. She doesn't know a thing about math or those kinds of things. And so there's tools out there that people can play with. And Erin's right. The other way this is going to become more familiar to us is it's migrating from the engineering schools, coding majors down to business majors and into the psychology majors and medical majors. So believe, and this is one of my roles, is every major should figure out how to incorporate AI into their major. That doesn't mean they have to know the math or everything like that, but the tools are so democratized that step one is become familiar with what it can do. And in doing so, you're going to become familiar with all of the risks as well. I don't know any other way than just jump in and play around with it. And today, like Erin said, anyone can do that.
Okay. Anyone else wants to add to that?
Hey, Tim, I wanted to add to that. One of the ways that I help explain what AI is to some of my friends who are not experts like this panel, I just say AI is a calculator. Remember, once upon a time we had, a calculator in finance, and then it became the Texas Instruments scientific calculator, right? And now we have, the cell phone that I put away because I'm not supposed to have technology on right now. And that's like a little computer. So thinking about AI or really machine learning, it's all about a little tool that can do calculations of risk and probability. So if we take it from that point of view, it's a little more accessible. Like you said, the familiarity is a deep connector of something that's black box versus, a calculator's a black box too, right?
And familiarity takes time and it takes patience, right? When I was courting my wife, I couldn't propose to her on day 2, right? I had to win her over with some chocolates and some flowers. And so I suggest that with AI, we start winning people over with chocolates and flowers, with those things that are the day-to-day actions, the blue collar things. If we try to rush it, it occurred to me that one of the reasons why we see it always happening in police and security is because that's where the money is and that's where the media sizzle is. Stop, slow down, and apply it to the blue collar, the more tactical things. And I think that will engineer some trust over time. And let's be more patient, right? The term AI coined in 1956. It's only been 66 years. That might seem like a long time. It's older than me, but it took humans 194,000 years. It took humans 194,000 years to invent the wheel. The AI, just the term AI, has been around for less than 0.0003% of the time that the concept and application of the wheel has been applied. So I'm not saying we take another 100,000 years, but I'm saying we should probably slow our roll and heed the advice of Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park. We were so busy wondering if we could, we didn't stop to think if we should. And I suggest we ought to slow down and think more precisely about where we should, how we should.
Okay, so I wanted to switch it back to from Courtney again. And she mentioned about her child. Proud mom of 2. I'm also proud dad of 2. She's director of planning and investigations for California Renters Legal Advocacy and Education Fund, as also involved with Alameda County. So, in terms of what we talked about and accountability and misinformation, what are your thoughts on this?
Well,
It hits right home.
We have a great answer from our Q&A chat from a Robert Olson, and I just want to give credit for it's phrased as a question, but it's pretty much the answer. There has to be accountability for bad actors if we really want to build that level of trust in AI. If folks who have been proven to utilize AI that in ways that negatively impact our democracy, our social systems, are just free to do so, how can we say, even on a local level, even in just not necessarily malicious ways, but inappropriate ways around sharing data and not being transparent about how the data is being utilized, even just from on a mission standpoint. Okay, we acquired this information through artificial intelligence, and we said we were going to do some predictive analytics on A, but we also used it for B. That's still a lack of transparency, even if you did not use the information in any type of malicious way. You want to make sure that you are informing the public and being honest, because we're in a very sensitive time right now where across the nation on both local, state, and federal levels, people do not feel like they can trust the government. They are very concerned about, what are you using my data for? Because we've seen in the past how data has been utilized in very inequitable and oppressive ways. So even just the slightest omission of something that's not even necessarily malicious still needs to be held accountable. And we can change that through making sure that there's appropriate legislation and appropriate accountability for when that doesn't happen.
Okay, no, I actually love that, Donaldo. So you're hearing it obviously from the people. You're hearing it obviously from the politicians, and how it's near and dear to their heart. And I think we all can all agree that there is concerns and monitoring of accountability. How can the Department of Justice help or assist in this, right? That one would anticipate in the expectations of a sense of neutrality, right? It's about defending the rule of law, right? And what are your comments and thoughts on that, whether it be from a past experience, current or future perspective?
Well, I mean, if you want, the thing is, for artificial intelligence, you need to have trust. And I think in order to get that trust, you have to be transparent. This is an evolving technology. As this technology is rolled out, it'll have to be massaged so it does what we want it to do, because sometimes that's one of the negatives that you have. Sometimes there's historical bias with some training sets that you use for artificial intelligence. So the only way you're going to be able to weed that out is look at what your model is doing, find out what is it meeting the goal, right? What are the goals of democracy, right? We want people to participate in government. We want people to be equal. We don't want any unnecessary or unwarranted bias. We have to look at the outputs of those models. And then when it's wrong, we have to fix that. And then part of our legal system is we are able to adapt. I mean, if we get things like artificial intelligence, make something like, let's say, the walking down the street, I assume that if I'm in a public park, people aren't going to know my name, right? But with facial recognition, somebody could have a camera and they could run that through all the social media feeds, and then they could identify me. I mean, that violates my expectation of privacy? And then we have a legal system that will go through that and say, that's not legal. And I think we had a recent finding that, I think it was a facial recognition company that was, it was scouring social media, and it was it was like identifying people with facial recognition by going through social media feeds. And that was something that was a violation of their constitutional rights. And so our legal system was able to adapt that and address that.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Tim. Again, you're as our, from an education and analyzing and really looking at, we talked about the training model, right? So that's predictive analytics, right? And automating and using machine learning. So tell us, from your perspective, how's this going to impact moving forward, right? Especially into the future.
I think we're going to see a big impact. I mean, you talked about natural evolution of technology, and certainly we're seeing a lot of natural, just gradual evolution. And we're going to become more familiar with that, see it in our everyday lives. We're already seeing it in our everyday lives. We just happen not to notice it most of the time. My biggest worries is, Ray Dalio has a great book out right now and talks about the idea that democracy gets thrown out the window very quickly when economics go bad. So the question is, or one big question for me is always, how is this going to fundamentally change the economics? Because when you can't feed your family, or you're worried about that kind of thing, suddenly the value of democracy goes down in comparison to the value of feeding your family. So I worry about little things, or big things, I should say. Things like, in 29 of the 50 states, truck driver is the #1 job. What happens in the next 3 years when we start having autonomous truck? analysts are already talking about 95% of our customer interactions, phone calls to call centers, will be through bots and bots that you speak to, and you won't know the difference within 3 or 4 years. What happens to those jobs, and will that affect our economy? And so those are, and this is particular to me because I started in economics and moved into quantitative analysis, but I always worry about the economics. At the same time, the positive side is in theory, the forecast is we'll be 40% more productive. All of us will have great tools to, as Suzanne was saying, assistive AI will make us superhuman. And so I'm always just looking at the balance between those two things and wondering what's going to happen. I don't have the answer, but something's going to change in a big way.
Suzanne, want to chime in there?
It's breathtaking. I mean, hearing what Tim said, it's just, first of all, just so true, right? And it's coming faster than people recognize. How many things are already automated, right? How many things cannot be done today in a manner that's not automated? So you're adding, you're also taking away. So there's very powerful shifts here, but the promise of the productivity is something that certainly could shift curves and could lift a lot of people. Let's just keep it going in the right direction. But honestly, I think, Courtney, I'm so inspired by you. I just have to, it's not on the point of discussion, but I just have to say, I love the spectrum of application of AI across this panel and all the people that are being served by it. And it's just been quite an inspiration for me today. So I'm so glad I could be here. Thank you.
Okay. Anya, any perspective from your part?
I think there's a couple of points with regards to models. I mean, I know that at least it's public to know that Google had been pointed out as having these models be a little bit biased. And, hopefully moving forward, that equal representation comes into play with the models. And you're right, the familiarity, I go back to familiarity and what are you doing for the people? Like, how does the quality of life, as my fellow panelists has mentioned, if we can improve the quality of life, giving credit to, yes, we've modeled it using what is called AI and rolling that out, I think we can get more buy-in of AI. We can get more trust in the AI.
So what's interesting is, and I'm seeing the feedback from the crowd, and one of the things, and kind of touched upon it and maybe haven't honed down, and I may ask Aaron to chime in on this, is the ownership of the data, right? So there's going to be data that will have to be shared, right, from a delivery. And I know Courtney talked about it from a facilitation of services, right? There is going to be data even from a medical perspective to be able to properly diagnose. There is also from a police and safety to be able to administer that protection. And even Donaldo said, something that would seem, fairly common, and it has happened in the past where you utilize artificial or facial recognition, if it's to protect the common good, and I know they use it in stadiums today because my companies and the companies that I've worked with utilize that technology, and sometimes you have no choice, right? You have to scan entire stadiums or entire public forums, or because of specific characters or actors that you need to prevent, right? And so at times it's that very, very fine micron thick line that you have to cross. But Aaron, just wanted to get your perspective on that, especially when you talked about previously on the different principles and the different the different modes that we can use from a data protection perspective.
Let me go to say that I don't have an answer for this, but I'm a part, and I hope that everyone on this panel continues to be part of postulating and formulating what that answer is going to be going forward. I think the question around data is actually much, much more interesting than the question about AI and who and how that's regarded. when there are computer vision, when there are cameras, and there are far more cameras out there than you even recognize and know, just on a single Tesla alone that already are capturing information. The question about the reasonable expectation of privacy probably needs to be reconsidered. And I'll couch this as a similar term like this. We're talking about AI, and I think there was a similar conversation around the invention of the automobile. What was the expectation of hay? What was the expectation of gasoline? Because, there were going to be far fewer carriages and horsemen, just like there are going to be fewer folks that are doing these jobs that are going to get replaced by robots and cobots. And so as there's going to be a natural evolution of the workforce and how hay and gasoline of today, data is going to transition, what does that mean? And how is that going to be provisioned? And how is it going to be guarded and safeguarded? It's going to be a changing economy. It's going to be a changing world. And we can either run from it, we can either stick our heads in the sand by it, or we can continue to have conversations like this. I applaud you and everyone on this panel and the Tortilla Bright Institute for having conversations like this, because more of it needs to happen. And, I'm encouraged by seeing, councilwomen like Courtney. We need to hold our elected officials accountable, not accountable for talking about responsible AI, but accountable for being responsible about AI.
Absolutely. Donaldo, any comments or Courtney?
Just that, I echo Aaron's sentiments. It's easy to get on a panel and say, yes, we must do this, but actually seeing the action and the legislation put forward and listening to what residents say when they say, this makes me feel uncomfortable, or I need to see this from you all to feel comfortable. You actually have to listen and then put forth the actions, because as we all know, it's very easy for politicians just to pay lip service and we don't see any changes moving forward. So the weight is in the actions, and I completely agree. And making sure that we're not just putting forth legislation, but understanding that laws must be reviewed and adjusted as technology changes, because they will easily become out of date as things change and improve.
And let me say here, when we expanded west as a country, we needed a geographic president, right? The Louisiana Purchase, etc. When we industrialized as a country, we needed an industrial president. We need going forward a digital president and digital leaders that are not only familiar with the terms, but are educated and experienced.
Okay, no, absolutely. It is truly fascinating, and it's interesting that from a Todd Morgan, you discuss again the role of data privacy, right? Because I think really that's at the core, right? So we talked about, and I think Courtney mentioned it, and we all talked about how you have to. There's the technology that's available today, and when it's going to evolve, it's going to impact a lot of things, going to help things. And I think we also kicked off the discussion that it could be viewed harmful. And we did talk about that there is going to be a socioeconomic impact to the world, which is just how do you, what do you do with those displaced, truck drivers or the street sweepers, right? Imagine if you think about that, right? You had the original street sweepers that was physically a person with a broom and brush dragging, and that now is with a vehicle that drives. So now that person, instead of doing it manually, now he's driving the truck. So now that truck would eventually be itself. Same with the garbage pickup, right? I recall the days when there were 5 individuals per the truck. They each got out, they went in, they loaded the garbage. The last time, except in Christmas, but the last time is usually one truck driver with an automatic handle. But during that Christmas week, all of a sudden the 5 guys show up as well, so to collect their envelopes. But yeah, there is there is a lot to consider. There is a lot with regards to the transparency of the government. I think we talked about that. Is great. There is still a lot of concern with the bad actors, and I think that I think Courtney mentioned it, that there is an evolution, and Aaron talked about that. The need for a digital president, right? Someone that understands the technology, and even with the advent of email, right, where the you're only accountable for the printed text. But then once that communication became electronic, okay, now there's an immediacy of that, right? When it was a printed text, it was until you physically received the letter. Now you can communicate with someone instantaneously, right? So the timing for and the scrutiny, and you utilize the tools to be able to capture it. If you look at from a discovery from a legal perspective, the people hours that it takes to go through thousands and thousands of papers with the utilizing of the technology, that can be done very quickly. So one can say, okay, you accelerate the application of law, the analysis of the information, the determination of right and wrong, but you also have to, as you're doing all of that, you keep coming back to, okay, how can you prevent, and maybe the answer is today, maybe not so much, or you have to put multiple layers. You know, how do you prevent the bad actors, you know, from stealing and manipulating the data, right? To ensure that, you know, is Aaron's statements, is Donaldo's statement, is Courtney's comments, are they truly Courtney's, right? And there is technology tonight available, which is from facial recognition to different types of validation of who you are, and zero knowledge truth. There's a lot of different technology today that can help verify your identity, right? So it's a great question and a great concern, and I think we talked about it about that. So and I think it leads a little bit into kind of the next question, which is, you know, does the presence of AI change the outcomes or shift the balance between risk and safety for the majority of people or just a few? I know I mentioned to it earlier, especially when you're talking about, you know, public safety and, big, large events. Donaldo, your comments on that, and then I'll open it up to the floor.
I mean, if it's properly implemented, AI should not make things worse, right? I mean, it's the capability to deal with large data sets. I mean, if we're looking at information on criminal activity or nation state activity, there's just so much of it that we rely heavily on artificial intelligence to help us get through that and make decisions. But yeah, definitely, okay. It should not impact. It should properly implemented. It should help us.
Okay, Tim, any comments on that?
No, I mean, let's talk about some positive cases of implementation. We always talk about the negative case of, putting cameras up and it can identify us. In Mumbai, they put cameras up and turned them on, and day one identified 2,000 missing children. So there's some incredible positive things to add to our safety and protect us as humans. There are some negative ones, and as Donaldo said, we need to watch out for those. We've got to be careful with those. But in general, I believe that the positive ones will eventually outweigh those that we consider negative right now. I think we're inventing some fear. Some of it is reality. I want to acknowledge that, but we are inventing things just because we don't know quite what will happen. But in reality, I'm seeing more AI applications in saving children. I saw some recently in helping refugees reunite with families, identifying them as they come into camps and reuniting them with their families. Just some amazing technology that's happening out there that furthers our protection.
Well, and I think to that point, there's also recent examples of cold case files that have been, 10, 20 years that have been recently solved because of the utilization of AI, of the data that's available, and just getting an 90% match from a family history can narrow down from billions of people to just a few, a smaller number, to narrow down the possibility that this individual is the culprit. So I think you're absolutely right. And you also think about it from an education perspective. I know, like I said, I'm a huge sci-fi, and we talk about that the kids there's kids that learning advanced mathematics, in the 3rd and 4th grade in comparison to, some of us learned it when we were already in high school or, so there is a natural evolution, whether it be in the way that information is administered, in the way that it's taught, in the way that it's presented, in the way that it's supported, in the way that we use it to govern, in the way that we use it to manage it. And so, from a democracy perspective, one of the biggest challenges, and again, this is not meant as a hot button topic, but it's about giving the people a voice, right? And utilizing the Courtneys of the world to help communicate that voice and communicate. Like you said, her primary objective is, one, listen to her constituents, is to communicate what their needs are. And then also her job is to communicate the pros and cons for certain positions, whether it be a hospital, whether it be a ball field, whether it be, power plant generation, or right in her backyard, new developments, right? Creating, affordable housing for all. So there's, and also it's surprising, even in America, there's still a challenge for providing affordable housing. We're in, an incredible bubble from a real estate perspective, but yet homes that almost doubled in cost as they were just a couple of years ago. So all of that, comes into play on how do you utilize the information, how do you make that available, and how it becomes. So again, it's almost like a repetitive theme is, how do we, and we talked about, how do you become accountable? I think it's discussed that. We talked about the transparency, and then also, we talked about the, how long would it take? So this is kind of an interesting question. How long would it take for AI to become a reality? And some would argue that some of it is being implemented today, and others would say that, we're 5-10 years away. And I think Aaron talked about it before. My prediction is it's already here, and it's only going to evolve and expand. And, what was once, again, from a services perspective. So Aaron, your comments on that. I know that you kind of touched upon that. So where do you see, AI both today and the reality, and how quickly before it becomes almost immersed in our lives even further?
So I'll talk very briefly, and I'm sure someone can pile on here. I say NAI, narrow artificial intelligence, is here, and it's been here for a while. And we need to focus on having far more narrow, very thin, and very pervasive implementations of AI, especially throughout government and the services it should be providing. I think GAI, general artificial intelligence, is a long ways out, if ever. And I think when we start talking about GAI, what people are really thinking about is not necessarily intelligence, but more consciousness. And I think we'll see terms and talk about that begin to shift as we start to be a little bit more thoughtful. But to the pointed end of the stick, and I'd like to hear someone else pile on, narrow artificial intelligence is here, and we need to have far better applications than just security and money laundering be the footing for it today.
So jumping on that, and I apologize for cutting in there. And as we talk about kind of, again, the theme of the call, which is AI and democracy, right? And I'll probably touch on Courtney. Do you believe, and whether it be your personal opinion or your fellow colleagues, that they view this AI that we talked about, all the different perspectives, as a potential threat, right? Or will it ever replace politicians or lobbyists? What are your thoughts on that? Probably a little bit of powder keg here with that question.
I don't know about the replacement piece, but I know it's a concern around deep fake, misinformation, disinformation being spread, how that is going to impact how we campaign and provide information to our constituents moving forward. I know that is at the forefront of everyone's mind. I was just recently elected, so I missed the big portion of the 2020 really heavy COVID experience and having to navigate and be an elected official during that time. So I don't have a point of view or an opinion from that standpoint about how it was so beneficial to utilize AI in that time period. But I know it's a concern specifically around disinformation. How can we make sure that what the information that we're providing isn't being manipulated and used, which would then, of course, foster deeper mistrust in the systems. But I don't know too much about the replacement piece, not from an elected official standpoint, but I know there have been conversations, not in Emeryville specifically, but just throughout, you know, society. How could AI potentially displace workers that typically perform more administrative functions in city governments and, you know, throughout the counties and the state? And there's been some concerns expressed from unions about making sure that we are not pushing those workers out, especially those opportunities for entry-level positions to actually come in to government roles and grow through those administrative roles, and miss out on those opportunities to build a career. So those are some concerns when we think about automation, and specifically automation of a lot of administrative tasks. But there's a balance, right? Because I feel as if as those roles do get more automated, there are still opportunities to reskill and skill up workers
Right.
who would have originally been in those roles. So I
Right.
think we can make sure that that transition is not inequitable for people who would have originally 30, 40 years ago would have used, say, like a city clerk role, or an administrative role as an entry level role into a city government administrative career.
No, absolutely. And I thank you for that. Suzanne, your perspective,
Oh my
you know,
God.
from the
I'm 3 questions behind, but if I can add on to what Courtney was saying and come back to Aaron as well. Let's start with this notion about the artificial general intelligence, the AGI, AI versus AGI. And I'm at MIT, and I just have to share, there's a war at MIT on this topic. Is AGI a thing? Eric Schmidt comes to campus, he's mobbed. He thinks there's never going to be AGI. The dean thinks there is. They go into the subroom. They're having an argument. It's all on tape. So this is a whole thing. But some people, and I would agree, would raise the very simple point that do we as humans have artificial general intelligence either? Are we holding AI to a higher standard? A brain surgeon generally cannot land an airplane, right? So people themselves do not have expertise necessarily in 5 things. Will AI ever have a general intelligence, or will it be very narrow expertise going down different verticals? But what I really want to do is come back to Aaron's other question, which had to do with the ownership of the data, because I think that certain people, not to be named, got off very light today because we never really drilled down on this very juicy and very messy topic. Who owns the data, right? Now, we talked a little bit about government, but government owns some data. They don't own the majority of the data. And then the question is, who does, right? And what I have to add here is that Sir Tim Berners-Lee, founder of the internet, co-inventor of the internet, he was very unhappy with what they did with his internet in this area. And he had hope that that data would be at the margins, would be distributed data, and it would not all be centralized. And of course, that's the opposite of what did happen. So now you have 5 large technology companies that own the majority of the data, and they decide what happens with the data. And those 5 are all fighting about the proper way to own that data and to deal with it. You have 5 different answers from 5 different companies, some of the largest companies in the world, on this topic. Who owns the data? How should the data be handled? And it's basically a war there as well. So I don't have any answers to these questions. I only have questions myself. I'm on my 3rd layer of questions, but in any event, ownership of the data, it's beyond the privacy. It's the data as a business model. and disadvantaging or advantaging people because of that data. I mean, this is going to go on for years. So I'm very curious either to throw that question to the audience and people can add later. I'd love to hear lots of opinions on this, or the panel. And you, Sydney, I don't want to take us off in a new direction, but we were going there anyway, so we might as well get there now.
No issues there. Tim or Donaldo, anyone want to add to that? As we close up, we're down to 11 minutes. Go ahead, Tim. Bring us home.
I don't have the answer for this one. I've seen some interesting solutions. I talked to a gentleman yesterday who's proposing, blockchain type solutions, which I've seen from a number of companies where you can own your own data and give it out to the people you want to give it out to, but ultimately you can pull it back if you want. I love that idea. I haven't seen it implemented well, but I love the direction those companies are going with that. So blockchain could be an answer, and giving individual ownership, but allowing them through blockchain to, rent it out or lease it out to those certain people. I'm not sure if that's the right answer. It's just one.
No. So first of all, I want to thank all of you for the invaluable and the different perspectives. And we touched upon a lot of, we could probably talk for another 4 hours on this topic, but part of the AI in democracy, right? We talked about, who owns the data. We talked about the accountability for the data. We talked about the access to the data. And that is an area on its own that needs to magnify. I think there is genuine concern with the availability of the data. And one of the concepts, one of the thoughts, especially from an AI democracy that I a founding member, is to create, in essence, as you create this avatar or this, virtual representation of ourselves, but also in turn representation of the Courtneys of the world, right, where they are standing on their points, right, and how can you preserve that data. And I think as individuals, we own the data, we own the rights of that data, right, and we also own the decision on what is shared, as long as we're not obviously performing crimes like anything else, right? You lose your rights once you break the law. But for the most part, we own what information is shared, and some of it may require, or perhaps the answer is a kind of recreating of that data, of that relationship, right? Because as we utilize the AI has to be trained, right? And it has to reflect. And whether if it's my voting experience, it'll reflect on my voting trends, on how do I feel, and how I feel today might be different than how I feel tomorrow, or how I historically felt. But it's also going to rely on the Courtneys of the world to communicate that position, right? If she's talking about the how opening up a new school because there's 10 more developments and so we need, and what's the value of that, right? She needs the proper, safe forum to share that information. And there's folks that are going to be counter to that, those that don't want to pay more taxes. But the reality is what do you do, right? You're not going to bust those people. That's going to cost them even more, because you're going to have to send them to another county, or you just invest, you spend a little bit more today to educate those. So that's just, one example of, how that the AI is going to help facilitate, it's going to help direct, it's going to help communicate, but it's also, going to, lead, it's going to lead the change, right? We're all change agents from all different perspectives, right? And so, I think it's a natural evolution, as we talked about, and we talked about all the different aspects we talk, and the data is not a question that's answered today, but I think that that is something that will evolve as the laws evolved, and we're relying on the Courtneys of the world to figure out, okay, once that data is created, do we go from scratch and recreate it again, or do we leverage information that's already publicly available? So there is a interesting crossroads, I think, that we're going from a government perspective. Donaldo, any, I guess, closing comments on that, and how do we get more information, and Any comments on that with regard? I mean, we talked about the government. You're in essence kind of our government representative, you know, non-elected, but drafted. So
yeah, I mean, I'll go out on a limb and I will say that artificial intelligence will not replace our elected officials, right? It'll make their job, it'll help them do their job. I mean, in a democracy, we have to make sure that people are equally represented. We need the politicians and elected officials to help resolve conflicts and just make sure that the rule of government is controlled by the people. And artificial intelligence, if done properly, is only going to help them. And I think I've heard one thing that resonated with me was like we should have I think they said a cyber president or an AI president. I mean, if going forward, as this technology is implemented, we need to make sure that citizens are aware of some of the benefits and some of the problems that we might have with AI so that they can effectively deal with them. I mean, it warms my heart to hear people talk about that the possibility of disinformation, because now they're looking for it. And I mean, that's what we do whenever we're dealing with any type of crime. We need to educate the citizens so they can protect themselves. So, I mean, discussions like this is great because, I mean, we definitely need to increase our awareness of this technology going forward. And I appreciate you guys for doing that today.
absolutely. And I think that to touch on that point, you're, you know, it's about the evolution. I think that being looking at it from the efficiency perspective, from the communication perspective, and then also, where that's leading to. So Aaron, so I'm going to go around the table. So we've got 5 minutes, just so kind of a quick minute on this topic, and how can we learn more, and a little bit about what's the future holds.
Let me answer the question that I want to answer, which kind of plays along, which is if we have an audience, what do I recommend you read? Because a lot of my points are formulated by the minds and the shoulders I stand on of others. So just 3 books I thought to share with you. Max Tegmark's Life 3.0. Excellent read. It sounds a little sensational, but it's worth in some very deep thoughts in there. And that leads me to my next favorite, Sean Carroll. Yes, a lot of stuff on quantum, but I think you're going to enjoy something deeply hidden. And then Michael Kanan recently wrote something called T-AI, which is another great book. So to you, I recommend not what I write all the time, even though I do have some good things you can probably go pick up and read, but those folks who are formulative to how I think and what I share with you today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. An honor. Anya.
I'm just pulling up this podcast by Accenture, actually, talking about AI in all multiple verticals of the government and private sector. And to tag on to the private and public sector, here's a wild idea. Why don't we work closer together so that government moves faster and then the private sector can be less scary and not transparent? And hopefully one day we'll have a dashboard that says this is what the government thinks of me, and every company is using that, and we have the right to turn it off. Wouldn't that be a riot, right? It's what's happening in Estonia right now. But yes, I'll find that link and I'll share it.
Thank you so much. Tim.
Well, when I try to figure out what's going to happen in the future, I often turn to fiction rather than nonfiction books. One of my favorites was written by a Tesla senior engineer named Gerald Huff, and it's called Crisis 2038. And don't go off the title. It is an incredible book and it presents a very well balanced view of things that could go wrong and things that could go very right if we use this technology carefully. But a very well thought out book. It's a little obscure. But Gerald was one that influenced Andrew Yang and his discussion of income, what's it called? Universal income. And so I think this is one of the most informative books, and again, a very balanced view in spite of the title. And I think you can get it free on Amazon, or the fundforhumanity.org gives it away for free as well.
Fantastic. Suzanne.
I have 3. My first is a shout out to Max here at MIT, and you're so right. He is just incredible vision. And I think if Max were here, what he would say is to just keep pushing it younger. The creativity from children, and just let them run. Just like a child can take an iPad and you don't have to show them how to use it, AI can be the same way. Ani was talking a little bit about that. What's going to happen when children are brought up in this environment and they don't think this is anything new? I think that's very magical, right? And I would also shout out for Boston Consulting Group. They have this notion of the bionic company, kind of the throwback to that old TV show, The Bionic Man, right? And how does a company transform with AI to become what could be a bionic company and then to be so much more successful? Not just Toyota being a model year ahead, but to be literally light years ahead of other people that are either AI deniers or slow adopters or what have you. So I think you're really going to see some separation of winners and super winners. And I think that the more this becomes, let's just say, universal or more part of the fabric of how people approach problems, and we're all going to get there faster. So I'm very curious to hear the comments on that. And I hope people will write in questions and whatnot, and we can keep the conversation going. So again, thank you.
Fantastic. Courtney?
Well, looking forward for the future, I know I look forward to utilizing AI to continue to solve the problems in my little corner of the world. I love the fact that we can use information to make big changes happen, such as if we've got a road in our city that has been shown that it's unsafe for cyclists and pedestrians, working on our general plan to reassess how we can design those spaces to make it safer for people who are walking or cycling or using wheelchairs or potentially have mobility limitations. And I want to expand that to make sure that we can change some of the bigger issues we've been dealing with, like health outcomes, especially as we're coming out of the pandemic, making sure that we are properly prepared for natural disasters, whether that be earthquakes, fires, as they're becoming more frequent in our state and specifically in the area that I live in. So I look forward to the technology growing and evolving, and also making sure that the legislation is in place to protect our residents from any type of attacks or leaks, and doing my part as an elected official to make sure those systems are in place to protect the data and the residents that provide it to us.
Fantastic, Courtney. Thank you so much. Donaldo, then I'll do a follow-up, Donaldo, with some closing remarks. You're on mute, Donaldo. You're on mute. You're on mute, Donaldo.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm hoping that this artificial intelligence can be used. I mean, it's a very powerful technology. I mean, just hoping we can focus it so that we can get more credibility of information that we see online. I mean, we need to have credibility. We need to have accountability of news networks and individuals. I mean, if we can get to that credibility, we can come to the universal truth we need, because we have to have some kind of base knowledge or base level of accuracy so that we can make the decisions that we need to do to put forth the democratic process.
Okay. Well, thank you all. It was an absolute pleasure and an honor to be amongst such a distinguished panel of guests. I want to thank Jill, Miguel, and Carlo from the Totoria Braya Institute for allowing us the privilege of representing, of amassing this tremendous panel that I had the fortunate pleasure to moderate. The conversation was extremely stimulating. I loved the interaction, the energy, and the passion. The technologies here today. I think that I'm more energized and jazzed up with being part of the AI in democracy. We anticipate it's going to take about 30 years to fully envelop, but you know what? We're excited to begin today. even if it's one bit at a time, if it's one delivery of services, and utilize the folks. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And may your travels be safe, and may your word be strong, and may our power to effect change be there. Thank you all for your participation.